Hey everyone, Melissa Navia here, and you are watching TrekCulture.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the TrekCulture podcast. We are your hosts, Sean and Ellie, but we're not important right now because we're being joined by the man of the hour, the star of the Delta Quadrant and beyond, Mr. Robert Picardo. How are you, sir?
I am very well. I've just been to the gym here in my hotel complex in Toronto, and I feel better than a man my age should feel.
I actually wanted to say, because this is, I want to immediately let you know that I've been stalking you for years, okay? And I will provide a little bit of context there is that I was on the cruise this year, and one of the mornings, and I'm not going to lie, the one morning that I did go to the gym, there you were, bright and early on the cross trainer.
I'm so happy to hear that. You hear that, world? You got to keep it together at any age. Yes, if you want to still fit in the spacesuit 30 years on, you got to go to the gym. All right. Let that be a lesson to everyone.
And actually, sir, especially for 30 years, happy anniversary, Star Trek Voyager, 30 years.
30 years indeed. Yeah, it's kind of amazing on a personal level to think how much working in the Star Trek franchise has changed my life personally. But also that the franchise seems as popular as ever around the world. Back in my day, 30 years ago, of course, we made it for broadcast television. Now, most of the shows, all of the shows premiere on a streaming platform, Paramount Plus, and are distributed that way around the world. But we have, let's face it, we have a dedicated fan base, and it's particularly gratifying for me to see in social media how excited they are that I'm coming back as the same character now in the 32nd century. Voyager was set in the 24th century, so now I'm an 800-year-old continuously activated artificial intelligence, and I don't think I look that bad for 800. I know holograms are not supposed to age, but believe me, we've given that some thought.
Oh, lovely.
So I can say, I'm only saying things about our new show that have already been said on stage at San Diego Comic-Con or have been said in press releases. I'm really good at that. Before anything had been released, when I was on last year's Star Trek cruise, where you were stalking me apparently, I went on stage at the beginning of the cruise and I said, I've just finished shooting season 1 of Star Trek Starfleet Academy and I can't wait to tell you nothing about it.
It's been like, obviously we're super excited for Academy, and we know as well that, you're wrapping now production or filming, season 2, but I know you've seen the pilot. We haven't seen anything more than that teaser. The excitement.
I was frankly shocked that the producers showed us the whole pilot, the cast and crew. We were sworn to secrecy, of course. Everyone's cell phone was nailed to the floor. But I asked the producer after, I said, boy, I expected it to be good. I was there when we made it. But the sheer beauty and scope and size of it really, I'm kind of knocked out by it. Am I allowed to say that? And he said, sure. So I reported, I said very little on the internet, but I said I was very excited to see it. And just what I said to you now, I was pretty knocked out by it, and I can't wait to share it with the rest of the world in early 2026. Now it's just tough. It's just tough waiting. I think my young castmates too, all feel that it's like, oh, come on, we can't wait for it to premiere. But I think that's all good. I think it's, some of my young castmates will be appearing at New York Comic-Con in a couple of weeks. So the studio knows what they're doing as far as, ratcheting up the anticipation for the premiere of the show. So, and I just, I can't wait, but it's not that far away now. We've got to, till the beginning of next year.
Mm-hmm. It is very, very exciting. But of course, let's focus a little bit backwards in time to Voyager, where it all started. I think when you look at the characters of Voyager, the EMH is probably one of the characters who had the most development and growth over those 7 years from when you saw him in season 1 to season 7 and beyond into other shows. But do you feel that there were any aspects of the character, any avenues that you wish had been explored more with the character, I guess, without giving anything away for future shows?
Well, I don't know. I mean, we told a lot of stories. We I think made 172 episodes, something like that, of Voyager. And I think my character, by definition, my character had the most developed character arc simply because I started with nothing, with no backstory at all, just programming. And over the course of 7 years, I got to grow more human-like. So when I first got the role, I don't think I understood how lucky I was and what their intentions were, the writers. I didn't know enough about Star Trek. My only fear was, I know Brent Spiner was super successful playing the last artificial intelligence character, Data, who was, of course, an android, not a hologram, but still an AI. And I thought, boy, I've got a tough bill to fill because I'm following him. But in the concept of my character, the producers very smartly made him entirely different. There was a childlike or Pinocchio-like quality to Data, that he was, had a childlike curiosity about everything that happened in the real world, and yet didn't have emotions until, of course, you went to the big screen. And the Doctor really was very much conceived as sort of the opposite of childlike, a curmudgeon, a crank, someone who seemed to be activated and have a bad attitude right out of the gate. And that made it funny. It made it funny to play a Starfleet officer that had so many negative qualities that the Doctor had early on. He was arrogant, he was a windbag, he was self-involved, he was easily insulted or miffed. There were just so many fun things to play, and then slowly develop a better self and a more human-like interface because of this unique programming he had with emotional subroutines that were designed for him to have the capacity to adapt and learn and hopefully developed a bedside manner as a physician. So I was very lucky to get the part. And as I said, because he started with nothing, he changed the most of all members of the cast. I don't think any of my castmates would argue that. And it was a fun ride.
Mm. Mm.
So, but in answer to the core of your question, no, I don't think there were a couple of ideas I pitched. There was a time travel thing that I loved, for the Doctor, that I pitched as a story that didn't happen because they had other ideas for time travel with Janeway's character. So, but too small to carp about, any disappointments I may have had were so small compared to the fun and the challenges I had playing the role that they pale in 30 years in memory. I don't remember anything really negative about it.
I think as well, one of the things that people are so drawn to about the EMH is this mentorship role that he filled so quickly, it seemed, on Voyager, because there was that relationship initially with Kes and then with Seven, and then we see that again in Prodigy. And I think based on the trailer, at least, we can infer there's going to be a mentorship role in Academy as well. So I was thinking, what is it that you think endears that character so much to a sort of a mentorship capacity?
Well, he's now 800 years old. I mean, he's basically the Yoda of the Star Trek franchise when you think of it. Yeah. So he's accrued a certain amount of wisdom and life experience. When the producers first approached me about the notion of reprising the Doctor character, now hundreds of years beyond his existence in Voyager, I thought to myself, 800 years of digital memory. What must that be like to have memories of a colleague who died 782 years ago be as vivid and clear as a colleague you saw the day before? And wouldn't that be a real curse as well as a blessing to have that kind of perfect clarity in memory? And what would that do to your desire to form personal relationships? Imagine growing up around 32 generations of organic colleagues, growing old and dying, working next to you. How interested would you be in forming relationships? There's things to think about in science fiction that are extreme versions of what humans think about in their own life. I mean, as a man who's just broken into his early 70s, the memories of my childhood now have this sort of hazy, glowy, perhaps rose-colored, look in the rearview mirror when you go back that many decades. But I can't imagine every moment, every second of my childhood being perfectly clear to me. Of course, the Doctor didn't have a childhood, but the analogy is, memories that far back, having perfect clarity. And as I said, and another interesting thing, and this has been released in the media already, our captain, played by the marvelous actress Holly Hunter, plays a character that is half lanthanite, and lanthanites are a very long-lived species. So she is 420 years old, and the Doctor is, somewhere between 800 and 900, I guess. So we have something in common. We can reflect on the curse of infinity, so to speak.
That's really, really interesting, actually, because listening to the process that you have as an actor to kind of inform your decisions, playing that role and thinking about the things that have happened. Because obviously you also returned as the EMH for Star Trek Prodigy. And I actually did wonder about your process when you returned as that character, which was a much shorter period of time between the ending of Voyager and when we see the EMH again, but whether you'd created any backstory in your own mind in that instance to kind of inform your performance as to what happened in between those two shows as well.
Well, let's put it this way. Alex Kurtzman, who basically runs the franchise now, said when I called him on stage from the Las Vegas Star Trek convention in 2024, when it had just been announced that I was part of the new show. So this would have been a year and 4 months ago or something. He said on stage, as I held the microphone in front of 6,000 people up to the phone, he said that, the Doctor was teaching cadets on Prodigy, and it seemed perfectly natural that hundreds of years later he would still be teaching cadets. And so I think it put something in his mind that, of course, I had never crossed my mind until I heard him say it then, that quite naturally, the Doctor, after his experiences on Voyager, might continue to be a teacher at Starfleet University and elsewhere. Now, of course, after the burn, this is the first Starfleet entering class in 120 years. So there's a tremendous, I think, wonderful feeling of optimism and hope and, rebirth, rebuilding after a very, very challenging period that imbues the show. And I'm a big fan of, optimistic science fiction. After 9/11, I feel that so much of our science fiction became apocalyptic, understandably, after that tremendous shock that was felt around the world, even though, of course, it hit our country, I guess, with the most most surprise and the and tragedy. But thereafter, it seemed like we don't know what to trust. We don't know what might happen next. We are living life, and suddenly at any second, something huge and terrible could happen. So look at shows like The Last of Us that are so popular now. Certainly all of the Mad Max stuff, which of course did frankly predate 9/11, but the kind of, there's been some terrible nuclear disaster and there are just a few surviving stragglers, but Star Trek has always posited a much more optimistic vision of humanity's future in space. And I think that we are very much, the show, there's a lot of optimism and feeling of renewal in our show without, once again, I'm saying things that have been said before.
There's actually that sort of brings me quite nicely to earlier this year, one of our colleagues at Cinema Blend, I believe you were having an interview at, I believe it was San Diego Comic-Con. And this was around, as we know, there's a lot of uncertainty in the air at the moment about, all sorts of things, I think is a general enough way of saying that. And one of your comments really stuck with us, and it was about how diversity is so baked into Star Trek. And I think a lot of us took a lot of heart from that. How do you feel that Academy is really going to help us see that diversity as part of Star Trek?
Well, it's a core value of Star Trek, and in the original series, certainly, Gene Roddenberry established that our past enemies are now our colleagues. We now work together at a time. The show premiered at a time of a lot of racial strife, and we had an African American woman in a high position of authority on the bridge. The Nichelle Nichols, God rest her, lovely woman, and really took that responsibility of playing an African American woman with power and commanding respect. In 1966, American television, Martin Luther King, basically said to her when he met her, "You are so important." She was thinking, I think, of leaving the show early on, and he said, "No, you can't do it. You basically mean too much as a role model." So really baked into the original series, it is that our former enemy is our friend. We have resolved our differences with our former enemies. Now we work together. It's really kind of I looked at Star Trek as the vision of the United Nations, in space, that we protect each other, but we also, the other core principle is just learning. We're not exploring space to plunder its resources. We're not exploring it for economic advantage or universal dominion. We're exploring it to gather knowledge, to understand our place in the universe better. It's pure, to seek out new worlds and new civilizations, to boldly go, you want to go where man has never gone before, extend the human presence, to learn primarily. And so cooperation among different peoples, alien races, and all that is really what the core of Star Trek's values are. So diversity, as I say, is completely baked in. And, we don't, I don't think that, current weather conditions and politics are going to change that value in Star Trek. And I think that, there are a lot of people that that are Star Trek fans that I have found out on the internet. We see Star Trek differently. We have different opinions about what is happening now in politics. And yet we all love Star Trek. They may see Star Trek differently than I do. They read in other values I don't see. I don't see it as American Manifest Destiny. I don't see it as promoting, as like it's core conservative American ideals and expansionism or even colonialism. I don't see any of that stuff. And yet I've talked to Star Trek fans who have a different vision of the show than I do. Just because we're in uniforms, I don't consider, and there's fighting in Star Trek, but I don't consider it a military show. It's really a show more about diplomacy. Now, of course, in the 60s, because Wagon Train to the Stars is the pitch that Gene Roddenberry made to Desilu Productions and Lucille Ball, he said, Wagon Train to the Stars, a different adventure every week as we go into the unknown frontier in space. So there had to be, fisticuffs, and you had to have Shatner fighting a giant green, dinosaur that looked like Barney. Because that was part of science fiction. But as I said, that core value of we have a philosophy, and our philosophy is basically, as much as possible, peaceful. It's to explore and learn. And then when we are invited into a conflict, or we feel a moral obligation because of our high moral and ethical values, if we see very immoral behavior, then it's a discussion with the prime directive as to whether or not we get involved and try to right that wrong. But as always with moral questions, people have a different perspective, I guess, on moral and ethical issues. So they can argue. They can see Star Trek through different prisms. And so that's, like anything, so many things get politicized nowadays that I really hope that people will view, any work of art on its own terms. Just watch it and don't come in with this giant agenda as to, because I don't like what's happened in some of the more recent Star Trek shows. I already have a bone to pick with this one that I haven't even seen yet, I mean, somebody wrote 5 pages on our 2-minute trailer, so a 5-page critique on the 2-minute, what do you got? I mean, I say, wait and see the show, right? Wait till the book comes out, read the book, and then comment on the book. Wait till you see the show.
Mm-hmm. So, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said earlier that it's a show about optimism. And I think one of the things that really shows in that is also about just the kind of variety of tones that seasons, shows, episodes can have. I mean, Tinker Tenor Dr. Spy is one of my favorite episodes of Star Trek ever made. And it combines comedy with some actually very serious themes of individuality, of humanity. I kind of
privacy,
privacy. Yeah. I mean, all sorts of very serious topics as well as the comedy. And when did you feel, even at the time filming that episode, that kind of responsibility of balancing the light tones with the darker tones at the same time?
I love that show. I agree with you. That is one of my 3 favorites. And I think of it more as a comedy, although have your inner thoughts. If anyone can deeply think about that, if someone could get inside your mind and see that you were, fantasizing about this particular girl who was in your science class, or this, to see all that happening would be humiliating for anyone to have your private fantasies on display. Having said that, it was so much fun to shoot. My favorite scene to shoot was when all the women are throwing themselves at me, and it was just so ridiculous. I'm even at that time, I thought I have to play this as if I'm the most desirable man on the planet. That's what I have to believe in shooting that scene. And boy, what a wonderful fantasy that was. Didn't last beyond the moment we finished that scene, but boy, fun.
Must have been very difficult to play as well with those beautiful women throwing themselves at you. Must have been very days work.
They were all terrific. They all, you know what I mean? No matter how hard the job was to find me that attractive, they all committed with an incredible, intense goodwill that was just so much fun. It was a very sweet show, and the man who directed it, John Bruno, went on to become a great friend of mine. We've been friends ever since. He's an Academy Award-winning visual effects supervisor, nominated 6 times, I think, one for The Abyss. He created the first digital character in movie making with a giant silvery thing in The Abyss. That's what John Bruno and his team won the Academy Award for. So he just was such a wonderful wealth of knowledge to hang around and learn from. And he also partnered with me, and we together pitched a story for Voyager's last season, I think, or next to the last season, called, where the Doctor meets his programmer because his programmer is severely ill, and the Doctor is convinced he can help heal him. And his programmer's like, "Come on, I know I made you. I know everything you are. How could you possibly help me? Don't be ridiculous." And it was sort of a futuristic version of a father-son drama, right? The programmer, being the father, says, "I designed you to do this. Why didn't you turn out the way I wanted you to?" And from the son's perspective, or the program, I can do so much more than you designed. Why don't you accept me for what I am? Why don't you recognize the special way I've expanded my programming that you gave me and become a unique individual? So it was a father-son drama in Star Trek terms, between an organic and a program that I thought was great fun to do. So, but back to Tinker Tenor, it's a favorite. I'm happy you enjoyed it as much as I did, and I got to sing opera in it as well, which is always a plus.
Excellent segue, because one of the things we really enjoyed is your musical journey through Voyager. And obviously, as I mentioned earlier, I was on the cruise stalking you, and one of my favorite things on the cruise was your concert with Arturo. It was fabulous, and it was also, my partner was with me on the cruise. It was his favorite part of the cruise as well, so definitely wanted to let you know that.
Thank you.
And just if you could speak to how much fun it has been to bring that music into both the Doctor, and then vice versa, the Doctor's music come over into your life as well.
It's funny how it happened. It was all a mistake. I've told this story before when I've been asked. I never, ever expected to sing as that character on the show. My suggestion to Jerry Taylor, God rest her, who we lost only less than 2 years ago, was simply that the Doctor listen to opera while he was working in sickbay. I thought that was a funny idea. I thought that this emotionless character working away alone in sickbay on some medical problem had this very passionate music playing. It would strike the audience as funny, but also go, why is that? What's going on? Why is this, machine listening to such an emotive, human art? That was the suggestion. I just thought it was a funny cutaway that was that he chose to listen to that rather than techno pop or whatever. So, and of course she said, very diplomatically, we're doing some Klingon opera stuff on Deep Space Nine now, so the timing isn't good, but we'll keep it in mind. And then I forgot about it, and 6 months later, I got a script that I'm singing opera in the opening scene. And I ran across the lot and said, no. You didn't, I wanted to listen to it. I didn't want to sing it. And she said simply, well, can you sing? I said, yeah, I can sing, but I'm not an opera singer. She said, try it. If you're no good, we'll replace your voice. And then it was done. It was already done. There was no argument. I was singing opera in front of millions of people in a couple of days. I mean, I was going to pre-record it, and that would be my performance. And I wanted it to be my voice. So I worked really hard and did, as I said in the opera show, I did about, 85% of my own singing. It was only in the episode Virtuoso where they had to bring in a real opera singer for some of them. But all the other shows, the other 5 shows, I did the singing in. Meanwhile, 2 or 3 years ago, I'm doing a production of a Gilbert and Sullivan operetta, or actually just Arthur Sullivan, called Cox and Box, about 2 men. It's a very silly sitcom type operetta. Arturo Chacon Cruz is in the audience. He meets me after the show and says, and I'd already heard about him and what a marvelous tenor he was. And he said, when I was training, I heard you sing on Star Trek. And I said, I'm so sorry to hear that. And he said, no, you were pretty good. So then we became instant friends. I have on my phone little voice lessons he sends me so I can extend my range. He's the kindest person I've ever met for someone with a God-given talent like that. It's extraordinary how humble he is. And you can see how much I love him in the show. We just got along great. He will be back on the cruise this year because he can't do it. They wanted him the year after for the 10th anniversary of the cruises. And he's booked years after this. For the next year and the year after that, he couldn't do it. So he's coming back this year, and he will be singing other stuff with, this time, other Star Trek actors will have the joy of singing with him. And I'm writing that show right now.
That is fabulous, because as things currently stand, I will be there. So I'm looking forward to it. So that would be fabulous. I'm trying to cajole Ellie into seeing if she can get on the waiting list as well, because it's totally sold out, I think, as well. The moment. It
is totally sold out. Who would have thought when I first heard about this 8 or 9 years ago, we were approached, and I'm thinking, I don't know. It didn't sound like it would be that much fun, but I look forward to it every year. It's a ball. It's a performance opportunity unlike any other, because you can do something very dramatic, like some of the songs in the opera show, and we do the silliest of broad comedy. And then we talk to fans about, what Star Trek means to them and what your character means to them. They meet new members of the franchise. 2 of my young castmates from Starfleet Academy will be on the cruise. So it's just a great, floating family celebration of Star Trek. And I enjoy the heck out of it every year.
It's really interesting as well to hear that, you started doing the singing as a kind of accident on Voyager, and it's something that you're still doing now, because Star Trek has been a source of influence and learning for so many viewers for so many different things. Aside from the singing, though, is there anything that you've learned from this franchise that's really stuck with you?
Well, the most amazing thing about it, I'm sorry this is not an original thought, but the most amazing thing is that Star Trek remains evergreen. Unlike other television shows and movies, new fans go back and they say, I like this, no matter where they came in. If they start with Prodigy and they're, 7 or 8 years old, then they start to go back and watch all of the other shows. I have met 6 and 7 and 8 year olds who have just watched 174 hours of Voyager. And to them, it's so fresh in their minds. And they want to talk about the work I did 30 years ago. They want to talk about it because it seems vital and present to them, having just experienced it. When I look back at my career and I go, gee, I wish I'd been a regular on West Wing or some other show that I really admired. I go, on balance, I'm happy where I am, because as wonderful as West Wing was, and as many people it's still not the same thing as Star Trek, where it's not just one show, it is an entire saga, and there's so many iterations of the show in series and in movies, and people who get into it go and explore all of it. They just come in at some point, and then they, like tentacles, their interest will go out in all different directions, and eventually they'll watch and then rewatch all of the work. And that is something I never expected. I didn't think that my work as an actor would, I guess the simplest way to say it, although it's a little morbid, it will outlive me, the Star Trek work, and that people will enjoy it long after I'm gone. And, you think of television as being disposable. I meet a whole generations of people. When I was a little kid, I loved Jack Lemmon. And then I grew up into a man in his early 20s, and I got to act with Jack Lemmon in a Broadway play. And that was the most exciting thing in the world. Now I mention Jack Lemmon to my castmates who are in their 20s, and they go, who? I said, yeah, he used to be a movie star. Never mind. Everything that, it's there are, if you're a film historian, you know who Jack Lemmon is, but there are generations of people now that are removed enough. And if they haven't seen some of those classic films, and yet they know Star Trek because they somehow got involved with Star Trek, and then they started to watch even the shows from the 60s where they, the sets look a little silly and the uniforms look like ski pajamas, and all of the alien girls are incredibly hot looking with short skirts and green skin, and they just go, okay, I accept it all.
And actually, Joe, it's funny as well. You mentioned about Star Trek does outlive the performance. Star Trek Can, of course, is now the podcast series is airing, which of course Tim Russ is appearing in. And there is, these characters based on Ricardo Montalban and Madeleine Roux, who were there in the 60s, and they are sadly, of course, no longer with us. And yet people are now rediscovering things like Space Seed. Those original series episodes are as explored today by new audiences as I think they've ever been.
No, I agree. And that is the part of being part of this saga I didn't expect, and that I think is really gratifying for me as an actor. And I would suspect my colleagues in the franchise feel the same.
There is, of course, another Star-based franchise that you have played a large part in as well. I've been a Stargate fan since I was a little one as well, and I loved Woolsey because I loved the journey he went on.
He was a complete asshole when we met him. I mean, complete.
He really was.
Irredeemable, not a glimmer of humanity, not a glimmer of humor. For me to play a character with no sense of humor and no apparent self-awareness, because I love, when I play, it's been my stock in trade, really, to play characters you initially don't like or you get a bad impression of. But then you start to see the chinks in the armor, you see whatever little bit of neurosis, whatever seems to drive them to their bad behavior, you start to understand them. And that's something that I've done a long time. Even wildly diverse characters like the gym teacher on The Wonder Years, which was a very popular show. There was a character, Mr. Cutlip, who really had an IQ maybe of a fish. He was a stupid man, but tenacious in his stupidity and paranoid. And he had all these wonderful negative qualities, and you start to feel sorry for the guy. You start to go, hey, ease up, relax. You could enjoy life a little more. If you can do that to an audience, if you can, and then they start to analogize that with people in their own lives, some guy at work or this or that they just don't know what motivates them and why do they act like that. It seems like they want to alienate people, or but you start to feel, I think you gain understanding from those kind of characters. Woolsey was really designed to be a one-off guest star. He was a bad guy. A tragedy has happened. I'm going to come in and talk to everybody, and I'm going to assign guilt. I'm going to pick one of you or many of you, and you're going to go down. You're going to go down for this. This is going to be the end of your career because something bad happened. That's his goal. I'm not a likable guy, but the producers liked me, the actor, and decided to bring me back once they had painted themselves into this terrible corner, creating such an unpalatable character. And then brick by brick, torturously, every time they had me back, I was a complete asshole with a glimmer of a positive quality, right? It's like, he's a complete asshole, but he's a complete asshole who believes in the importance of government oversight of a secret military operation. That's a positive thing. And he's a complete asshole who believes in secret, oversight of a secret government but he also doesn't want to be a complete asshole anymore, but he doesn't know how to stop being, it was like he had these little moments of humanity. And then eventually he became a hero, which was a bigger surprise to me, I think, than any fan, that they recreated this man. And at the time, I was doing this in late 2000, and I think it was 2006 or 7. There had been a huge worldwide financial crisis, the subprime mortgage crisis. A lot of people lost their life savings, and a lot of people Woolsey's age that they thought they were retiring or near retirement suddenly had to go back in the workforce, and often they had to completely reinvent themselves doing something else because they couldn't get a job. And that's what I thought of Woolsey. It's like a guy who late in life, he had to reinvent himself and go from being an asshole, going from a guy who judged other people's leadership capabilities, and suddenly he was the leader. And he had to, he had to live up to his own idea of what a leader should be from having critiqued so many others. And he had the personal skills didn't come well to him. He was not a people person. He did not make friends easily. People didn't like him, and he had to try to overcome all that. Anyway, that was my Woolsey rant.
Love that. It's actually quite interesting that you talk about your preference of characters to play, because you've actually mentioned before that originally you wanted to play the role of Neelix over the Doctor. Would you say that you're glad that your mind was changed on that?
Well, first of all, the actor who got the part, Ethan Phillips, who we call Johnny Phillips, is one of my dearest friends. I didn't know he was my competition. He was already my friend of many years when we were auditioning. I didn't know he was my competition. I simply looked at the script and thought Neelix was a better part in the pilot. I thank God every day that I did not get the part. I came very close. We both tested. My understanding is that between the producers and the network, I heard that the producers wanted me, and they both liked both of us, but the producers were favoring me and the network was favoring him. And thank God, because I would have killed somebody. I did some heavy makeup roles in my youth. I could not have spent $4,000 to $5,000 hours in the makeup chair. So I am grateful that I didn't get the part. I had no idea that the Doctor, which was such a boring character in the pilot, would develop. I didn't get it. He was described as humorless, colorless, a computer program of a doctor. Does that sound like a bucket of fun for, 7 years? I didn't understand. I thought, oh, well, we've got a Vulcan. He'll be the outsider character I've heard so much about in Star Trek. You know what I mean? He'll be the Spock character or whatever. I didn't get that I was the guy who was going to function in that classic Star Trek role of the character who stands apart from humanity, who critiques humanity but aspires to be part of it. And then, of course, the elegant thing about Voyager is I hand that role off to Seven of Nine. And I become her mentor because the Doctor has enough of an ego to think that he's a better teacher of how to be human than a human, which made it so much fun. And that I take credit for that suggestion, because when Kes left the show, I went to Brannon Braga and I said, Kes was the Doctor's sounding board. He revealed sides of himself to her that he didn't to anyone else. And I'm concerned that now that she's gone and I don't have that confidant, that I'll go back just to being a punchline, I'll be the butt of jokes again. Nobody understands me or whatever. And he said, well, we're adding this character, Seven of Nine, a former Borg. Think about a unique way in which you could relate to her. Now, when I saw Jerry Ryan at age 27, every man would think of a unique way they would love to, relate to her, but it wasn't appropriate for me at 41 or 42. So I went back to Brannon a week or two later and I said, what if we take the relationship I had with Kes and flip it? So that Kes was mentoring my sense of entitlement and my developing humanity. as an artificial intelligence? What if I am mentoring 7 of 9 in regaining her humanity? And I specifically said we could do role-playing exercises, which would teach her appropriate behavior in business and personal situations. And that suggestion, the first time they did it, which was early on, where I'm playing doctor with her, but not in a fun way. I'm teaching, she's the doctor, I'm the patient, and I'm teaching her appropriate behavior. And because she has no editing skills in her personality, it's a disaster. But that ultimately culminated in someone to watch over me, where the doctor is teaching her how to behave on a date, and he falls in love with her, just like My Fair Lady. So that is, of all of the ideas that I had, some of which they liked, some of which they didn't, that was probably the best one, because Sherry and I had some wonderful scenes together. She's a delightful human being. It was fun to work with. Great sense of humor about how she looks. And it really was fun. And of course, a fantasy for all of those middle-aged bald men in the audience to see me talking all the time to this gorgeous woman. I'm sure that was gratifying to all the guys like me who look like, shoe salesmen or bank tellers out in the world.
But actually, just this afternoon, I was reading an article, and I mean, you had a fabulous fro in prior years, sir. Fabulous fro.
Yes, that picture that was just given to me less than a week ago was the turning point of my life. It was, for those of you who didn't see it, it's a picture of me meeting Leonard Bernstein at age 19. I've just performed in his play in a role. The play is the Bernstein Mass. It's kind of an odd mishmash of different musical forms with a full orchestra and a singing chorus and a boys choir and a rock and roll band and everything. And it's basically an analogy, Bernstein's analogy, of what can happen to religion once it becomes institutionalized. And I play the gospel preacher character, who is kind of the dark, insincere religious figure versus the celebrant, who is the true religious figure. So I'm the bad guy, but the fun bad guy. And I had this huge hair and stupid sideburns, and I'm wiggling my butt like crazy and jumping around the stage. And I'm a biology major who's doing this for fun. And I meet Bernstein after the show, and he loved my performance. He said, "You have natural energy on stage, not phony Broadway energy. What are you going to do with your life?" And I said, "I'm studying to be a doctor." He said, "I'm surprised to hear that. I think you'd want to be an actor." And I said, "Would you say that to my mother?" And that's how it happened. And that's the conversation memorialized with that picture. It was someone taking a picture of one of my colleagues in the orchestra, a guy named Dan Feller, who played principal cello, went on to a very successful career in medicine, but he was also a terrific amateur cellist. So he was playing in the orchestra. Somebody's taking a picture of him as he's watching Leonard Bernstein talk to me in the foreground. But it happens to be that moment where my life changed, which is kind of a weird thing to be given. Here's the photo of something you remember very clearly, but you've never seen it. I have no picture of me and Leonard Bernstein, where you can see both of our faces like that, maybe a group thing but that is a moment in my life that really began my journey as an actor, or trying to be an actor, that seems to have worked out. And it was great fun to have that come across my digital threshold a few days ago.
And it all came full circle. You ended up becoming an actor playing a doctor.
Exactly. People say, did it help any? I say, I think studying biology helped also, because you understand scientific reasoning. And Star Trek, for all of the made up science, it's embedded in real science. And all of the doctor speeches are written by people who understand scientific reasoning, right? Here's what I've observed. I'm going to design this experiment. I'm going to collect the data, and I'm going to form a hypothesis in here. And all of the doctors, I've seen this. This is what I think. Now I've done this, and now I conclude that. All of that follows the rigor of scientific reasoning. And in that respect, I understand the structure of the thinking, and that I think did benefit me. Who knows? My wife is a real physician too. That helps a lot.
It would. That's something I think that Star Trek Prodigy, I think, is really it's a fabulous, I think, ambassador for both Star Trek and its approach to science, because Dr. Aaron MacDonald, who appears in Star Trek Prodigy as well as writing all of the science for Star Trek, I think, that we've seen over the last few years. I just had a quick question about how different was it, or how challenging, I guess, appearing in Prodigy, which is, I guess, by the nature of recording, much more of a solo. Or was it a solo recording experience as opposed to playing off people?
Yes, years ago when I did animation like Justice League of America and all that, some directors would really get all the actors together, and that was a lot of fun. But now it costs too much, and it's a scheduling nightmare. So I think everybody is recorded individually. And yes, I never, in the actual recording, the producers are reading the feed lines. You're not hearing Kate Mulgrew's voice, even if they've already recorded her. So it's different. And the main challenge for me was keeping the Doctor's voice. I mean, I'm 30 years older now. My voice is lower and all that, but just pitching it the way I remember the performance then, which I think I did fairly successfully. And truth be told, I give a lot of thought to how the Doctor would be different now, many hundreds of years on. And because I loved in Star Trek Picard season 3, loved how all of those wonderful actors from Next Generation had grown and changed and developed. And I thought that was a real tribute to their talent and to Terry Matalas's writing, that we could see how the years had changed them, how the character, what was the same, the core values were the same, but how they'd gone in different directions. And I found that really interesting. So naturally I had to think, well, these guys have gotten 30, 35 years older. What does it mean to get 800 years older? What does that mean? So again, without giving anything away from the story, that was on my mind. How does he change? How does he sound different? But, but my goal is to speak incredibly quickly, crisply, and because my personal theory is the exposition in science fiction needs to be delivered at breakneck pace. You could take the moments elsewhere when it's a moment of a relationship moment, but if you are spewing information about the plot, get it the hell over with. That is my motto.
Mm-hmm. Well, we are big fans of Star Trek Prodigy here at TrekCulture. We're all holding out hope that one day maybe there'll be more of it.
And why not? I mean, it did so well on Netflix. I know it was made originally for Nickelodeon. I think with the reviews it got and all, I was surprised that it wasn't picked up, and I think Kate was surprised and even a little hurt because it was so well received. I guess it must be more expensive to make than I'm ever aware of, but I hope it will still happen. People look at it. The Orville has been off the air longer than Prodigy, so if that can come back, and it might still, then maybe that same person who bankrolls that will bankroll Prodigy, whoever you are.
That'll be Seth MacFarlane. The way you're a Trekkie.
We know you love Star Trek, Seth. Come on, yeah.
Absolutely.
I think the thing with Prodigy, though, is I think similar to what the aim is with Academy, is it appealed to a new section of audience, to draw in new viewers, to draw in people who hadn't necessarily grown up watching, or to maybe simplify it for those who find the technobabble quite complicated. I know I struggle sometimes with the technobabble, and I found that Prodigy was something so helpful in not dulling it down, not talking down to children or people who found it more complicated, but simplifying it so that it could be understood but in a way that also kind of boosted you and made you feel clever rather than stupid. It's a tragedy.
And it's great. And, it was designed really for young viewers. You're certainly a young viewer, but you're also not 8, 9, and 10 years old. So the fact that you really loved it, that was the bonus. I mean, they really wanted, this is very smart for any aging franchise to gear a show toward, to capture imagination starting at 5 years old, because I think maybe even 4, you could watch Prodigy and enjoy it. But certainly by 5 or 6, you could start to get it. And then their core, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, that was the audience they're really trying to capture, hoping that parents will sit down with their children and watch it. But the fact that you are a young adult and you watched it on your own, presumably, not with an 8-year-old next to you, right? That you love it. I mean, that is, what better recommendation for the storytelling and for the uniqueness of the animation. I mean, I love Lower Decks is great, but it's that kind of animation. This was like, these characters were so rich and funny and unique looking. The animation is really quite beautiful and crazy in Prodigy in a way that's, I mean, I don't know what is there any other entity you've watched that reminds you of Prodigy's animation?
I'll be honest with you, I don't generally watch animation, so it does really speak to how brilliant this show was. And I also think part of it is the fact that it did continue those Voyager stories in a way as well. It did that, it had those characters for the younger, newer viewers, but it also had that appeal to existing fans as well, with continuing those stories of the Voyager characters too. Yes.
Well, I was caught off guard by how broad its appeal was. I really thought, it's going to be parents with kids of a certain age. They'll be the only adults I know who've seen it. Not the case at all. So many adult viewers have loved Prodigy. That's the part that I found. And I don't know if Kate was surprised too, but she certainly recognized that and did everything she could to get it picked up. I really wish I think it's, the more time goes by, the less likely it is, but I still hold out hope too that it will.
So do we.
Come back.
I suppose that the handy thing about it is that it's because it's animation, there's no technical ages. Like, people aren't aging out. You just draw the character or design the character to look a certain way. So it in theory could come back in 5 years and just do the next day. And, we wouldn't really lose anything in that respect. The fun thing that I think is that between Prodigy and Academy, you get to both appear as you are, as a handsome man in his 70s, and also you get to look as you did in Voyager as well. You get the best of both worlds. It's brilliant.
It is. You're absolutely right. It is. It is pretty funny, and I am. I guess I'm grateful, mindful of how lucky I am to play a character that technically is immortal, even though I'm not an immortal actor. And the fact that, that's the reason my character can be on this show. I understand it. I know all sorts of things happen in Star Trek and we say no one really dies. And of course, you can always have a stunt casting possibility with someone on the holodeck and review something that's hundreds of years before. But in my case, it made logical sense that he was still active, unless some catastrophic disaster had happened that decompiled his program. He could still be around. And why would he not be teaching as he had taught cadets on Prodigy so many hundreds of years before? And the other cool thing, as I said, about Starfleet Academy is that it's restarting Starfleet after a terrible cosmic disaster known as the burn. It's the first entering class, so we're just full of hope and forward-looking excitement.
Well, I think that is a fabulous place to bring this to a close. Robert, I want to thank you so much for your time.
Sure.
You are so kind. We are so excited for the show. To the point where like it's becoming a problem. Like we need it. We need it now. So
I just want to point out my new hat, which I just bought this week. This is my Canada hat with the flag here. Don't moose with me, because I'm spending so much of the year up here in Toronto, and I feel very welcome here, very welcomed, very at home, and our crew is wonderful on the show. All of the wonderful people that I'm working with. It's a real melting pot and a great life experience for me. So I went and spent an enormous amount of money on this baseball hat, but it was Canadian, so I got a little bit of it back.
That's not too bad. I'm delighted to hear as well that finally they're paying you the $900 million per episode, which you know.
Which barely covered this hat.
Yeah. The exchange rate.
No such thing, but from your lips to God's ears. But I'm really I'm enjoying the experience of being the old man on the set, older than anyone else in the crew, certainly older than anyone else in the cast. It's not so bad. And I remember back when I worked with Jack Lemmon being the youngest man in the production. Of the whole in the cast back on Broadway. So it is a great feeling to still be enjoying acting and to love what I do so much at this age.
You are a gentleman and a scholar, and I suppose the fact that you're filming season 2, we look forward to not seeing a horrific death scene for the Doctor in season 1, which is brilliant.
I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, I guess I gave away something. I did give away a big secret. There you go, guys.
That is fabulous. To everyone who is watching and listening along, thank you so much for your time. You are awesome. You are wonderful. Of course, if you are not already following Robert on social media, what are you doing? Go and follow him on social media.
And also, please check out the Planetary Society at www.planetary.org. It is a nonprofit I have volunteered with for nearly 30 years now, 27 years. Bill Nye, the Science Guy, is our CEO. We fight for increased funding to NASA, and we're in the battle of our lives now because present leadership wants to cut NASA's space science and deep space exploration funding by 47%. So many of us are going to show up in Washington, D.C. on the day of action, October 6th, and meet with members of Congress and say, no, space is a priority with us. Space is important to us. And you can't just put all the money in human space exploration without doing the science that gets the humans there. You can't compartmentalize what we need to know and understand about exploration and our future in space. So I encourage you all to get involved and write to if you live in the US, write to your members of Congress so that they do not eviscerate NASA's budget for space science and deep space exploration.
Thank you so much for watching along. Did you know that you can also listen in and catch every episode of our podcast just by following the link in the description below this video? Please make sure that you subscribe to the channel and please make sure you're following us on the various socials. Till I see you again, look after yourselves, make sure that you live long and prosper.